Okay, my name is Jude OZOR. I am a PhD student in economics at University of Strasbourg and Catholic University of Lille. I am here to present this work on innovation ecosystem, the orchestration of complex relationship and impact on adaptive capacity of firms. Well, as a way of outline, we'll have introduction, the theoretical background, the research methodology, the results, discussion, and conclusion. As a word of introduction, today, economies face a lot of challenges, competitions, and market challenges, and this threatens the competitiveness of firms. And then policies today centers on how to develop new approaches and frameworks that can influence adaptation processes. And then innovation ecosystem emerged and emphasizes on collaboration and interdependence of actors to stimulate productive network. Scholars have talked about innovation ecosystems in different ways. And then all of them centers around interdependence and diversity of actors. Here we say innovation ecosystem is a network of interdependent of diversity of actors that interact to produce innovation and collectively create value. Some work on local innovation ecosystem focuses, identify three components that are interaction in innovation ecosystem, which are the underground, the upper ground, and the middle ground. Now, in this work, we discovered an innovation ecosystem today. A lot of economies, both national economies and regional economies, center their innovation policies around the ecosystem framework. Again, the scientific literature today talks about innovation ecosystem a lot. Majority of them are theoretical. For example, in R&D management, scientific journal, Technovolution and rest of them, all of them center some of their sections on innovation ecosystem. But then we discovered that there's a lack of empirical studies on innovation ecosystem. And therefore, in this work, we'll try to ask, do innovation ecosystem truly impact on the adaptive capacity of firms? We also want to know to what extent does the middle ground impact on technological development of firms? These are the questions we'll have to answer in this work. Okay, the theoretical background, the interconnectedness and interdependence of actors in innovation ecosystem and the co-evolution of actors. These are the things, the characteristics that differentiate innovation ecosystem from the strategic relationship found in clusters, for example. And then we have three distinct characteristics of innovation ecosystem, as we have identified. First of all, we have diversity of actors. And then we have complexity of relationship. And then the cross-sectoral structure. This particular one is identified by Kohonde and his colleagues, where they talked about the underground, the upper ground, and the middle ground. The underground, the upper ground are the formal actors who have the exploitation capacity. They develop economies, the firms, organizations that have exploitative capacity. And then the underground refers to informal actors, the artists, the researchers, the scientists who belong to the exploration, who have the exploration capacity, and then where the ideas are generated, Whereas the middle ground is the intermediary platform that brings together the actors in the upper ground and the actors in the other ground for interaction. Now, we identify that these characteristics forms the sources of adaptation and sustainability of ecosystem. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Regional studies identify that diversity provides the portfolio against shocks. And then Bartlett and his colleagues identify that different forms of interaction brings about global pipelines, which allows firms to have access to external sources of knowledge for innovation to enhance their innovative capacity. And then the middle ground, as we will discuss here, orchestrates complex interaction between the actors in the formal sector and the informal actors to foster co-evolution and adaptive strategies. And then innovation ecosystem, as we see, provides mechanism that enables actors to adjust their behaviors and strategies to adapt to the technological and market changes. Again, diversity found in innovation ecosystem allows actors to explore new growth trajectories. And therefore, we posit in this work that adaptive capacity of firms depends on two things: the ability to innovate and the ability to diversify their technologies. And therefore, we posit our two hypotheses as the innovation ecosystem affects firm innovativeness, and hypothesis two, the innovation ecosystem affects firms' diversity of innovation. Now, the platform-based ecosystem identified the role of platforms, the digital platforms, as a platform that orchestrates interaction in platform-based ecosystem. But works on innovation ecosystem identify middle ground as this form of platform that orchestrates interaction between formal and informal actors. And therefore, works identify that middle grounds take in form of projects, spaces, places, and events. And therefore, this motivated our third and fourth hypothesis. We therefore ask what our third hypothesis says: participation in events positively affects technological development of firms. And then collaboration in projects affects technological development of firms. Now, our methodology, based on our research questions and the research objective, we employ both case study and econometric techniques in this study. We focus on local innovation ecosystem on Hauts-de-France region. Of course, the region has been identified as a transition region as a result of the failure of their main economic industries in the 70s. And then today, they are making a lot of efforts for a sustainable transition and adaptation. And one of the measures is the creation of innovation parks, which is characterized by a diversity of actors, to support the regional transition and adaptation. Okay, our econometric models were to test our first hypothesis. We use the logit model. The choice of logit model is motivated by the fact that our dependent variable here is a binary variable. And then we want to test the impact of innovation ecosystem on the innovativeness of firms. And then the second model, we use ordered logit model. This is motivated by the fact that our dependent variable here is ordered. as we can see in the next few slides. Now, to test our third and fourth hypothesis, we use zero-inflected negative binomial model. This model is, the choice of this model is because our dependent variable is a count variable, and then there is over-dispersion in the data and excess zeros. And now, zero-inflected negative binomial model allows us to use two different types of model, the negative binomial and the logit model together in one model. The negative binomial model will test the count data, the non-zero variables, and then the logit model will help to predict the zero categories. Now, we define our dependent variables as follows. The firm's innovativeness, we use Innoscope scores. Innoscope score is used by INSEE and HDFID, to show the innovation potentials of firms. This Innoscope is measured by about 13 ratios and indicators, broadly divided into two. One of them is the exploration capacity or potentials of firms and the creation of innovation potentials of firms. And now at the end of this, they identified the graded firms into 4 groups: the non-innovative, creative, efficiency, and innovative. And then in this study, we use the scores of 2 years, 2013 and 2017, which is the latest we have. And now we posit that a firm moving from a lower state to a higher state means the firm is innovative. And then if otherwise, it takes 0. In other words, this variable is a binary. It takes 1 if it maintains a high level of status or moves from a lower status to a higher status. Otherwise, the value is 0. Now, technological diversity. We follow kurtosis to say that the technological diversity of firms is taken from the number of IPC 4 digits. We went into their patent data to identify the number of IPC 4 digits. And we posit that the higher IPC 4 digits in your portfolio means the higher diversity of your technology. And then we ordered this number. 1 to 2 is low, medium, and high, based on different number of IPC 4 digits. For technological development, we use the number of patents by each firm as a proxy. Some authors have acknowledged the fact that this is a good measure of technological development. And then for our independent variables, our innovation ecosystem variable is a dummy variable, which shows that if you belong to innovation ecosystem, it takes 1, otherwise 0. And then the event, we measure event by the number of participation in events organized by specifically innovation ecosystem. And this ranges from 2010 to 2015. And then we group this participation, number of participation, into never, that is 0, rarely, sometimes, often, and most very often. Then for projects, we use dummy variable to represent this. If you have participated in it, you have collaborated in R&D projects, it takes 1, otherwise it takes 0. And then we have age region. This represents both technical, advisory, and financial supports received from the regions, and it ranges from 0 to 5. Then we have exports. This is a share of exports in the turnover of firms. And then we control for firm size, firm age, location, and position within the network. And then we have our results. First of all, we use a Shannon entropy index and modified Affindel index to test or check the diversity in the innovation ecosystem. And then these two entropy measures shows that there is a high diversity, sectoral diversity in each of the innovation ecosystem. Again, we identify the actors in the upper ground, the actors in the other ground, and the actors in the middle ground in each of these innovation ecosystem. For example, the upper ground, we can see the research laboratories and research centers and laboratories. We can see the competitiveness cluster. For middle ground, we can see incubators, accelerators, events, third places. And then the other ground, we can see the talented actors, informal groups, artists, scientists, researchers, and rest of them. Now, we found in this work, there are three main networks that facilitate different forms of interaction. These include the competitiveness cluster, the business cluster, the innovation hubs. The competitiveness cluster, for example, through innovative projects, facilitate interaction between large companies, universities, research organizations. And then the innovation hub, for example, through the incubators and accelerators, facilitate interaction between large companies, startups, research organizations, financial organizations, and rest of them. And then the network, the structural network analysis, the graph the graph shows that ORCHESTRATION ecosystem, for example, is so dense, is more dense than oral technology, for example. We have about 700 actors in ORCHESTRATION ecosystem and about 550 in oral technology. Now, this, okay, the econometric result for our models 1 and 2 shows that innovation ecosystem positively impacts on firms' innovativeness. And similarly, innovation ecosystem positively impacts on technological diversity of firms. We found that regional supports have positive impacts on both innovativeness and technological diversity. Firm size also have positive impact effect on both innovativeness and technological diversity. We found also that firms in North and Pas-de-Calais are positive and statistically significant for innovation performance. Now, for our model 3 and 4, we have our results. And then we found that events generally impact on technological development, but the impact depends on the frequency. The participation of higher frequency, for example, often and more often in events, positively affects technological development. But our result shows that those in the lower category actually does not impact on technological development. We found that projects positively impact on technological development. Interestingly, we found that for firms within zero group, the regional support and firm size are negative. And this means that the more they receive regional support, the more they are able to live from that zero group. In other words, it has an influence on their ability to belong to a non-zero category. Okay, for our discussion, interestingly, we show that innovation ecosystem enhances both firms' innovation performance and technological diversity. And then we have, as we have identified, that these are the two components that represent our adaptive capacity. Regional support at the same time influences or increases the likelihood of innovation performance and increases the probability of belonging to a higher level of innovation, technological diversity. In terms of innovation performance, we found that SMEs are likely to be more innovative than larger firms. Of course, we have some other works that identify similar results, that SMEs are more often favorable for innovation performance. We also find the impact of geographical proximity in our results, such that firms in North and Pas-de-Calais are more innovative. Of course, this is the region where most of the innovation parks are located. In terms of technological diversity, we found that larger firms have larger odds of being in a higher technological diversity category. And then this explains that they have better access to sufficient funds to finance their diversification and R&D activities. We found also that exposure to external markets increases the likelihood of becoming more technologically diversified. Of course, Baldwin and Jude 2004 found a similar result about Canadian plants, where they found that exposure to external markets increases the ability to get more diversified. And then our middle ground in terms of events and projects contributes to technological development of firms. Regional support and firm size reduces the odds of producing no technological development. In other words, the regional support impacts positively on technological development. Now, conclusion. First of all, we identify the main characteristics of local innovation ecosystem in this work in terms of the structure, the organization, the complexity of interaction, and the diversity of actors and sectors. We also deduced two distinct and testable measures of adaptive capacity in terms of innovativeness and technological diversity. We empirically show that innovation ecosystem impacts on adaptive capacity of firms. We further empirically show that middle ground in terms of projects and events impact on technological performance of firms. The impact of proximity is also found as firms in Hordofront region are significantly more innovative when they belong to the innovation ecosystem in the region. Of course, this is interesting because our measure of innovation performance is not just a quantitative measure, but it includes other changes in the firm's innovative behaviors and not just the quantitative measure. And therefore, in conclusion, in terms of regional policy, our analysis shows that various instruments used by the regional governments contributes to making the region more adaptable, more resistant, and more resilient by ensuring the adaptive capacity of firms within the region. At this point, I want to say thank you for your attention.